All right. In the interest of time, I think we should get started, and then we'll see who else will join today's session. So hello and good morning in the US, good afternoon in Europe, and good evening in Asia. And welcome to this session about critical thinking and AI. Now, before we dive deeper into today's topic, and indeed before we introduce ourselves, let me just start by trying to set the stage. And for that, I need my slide deck. So hang on a second, then I'll just share my PowerPoint here. All right. Okay. I hope you can all see the hockey stick here.
Yeah,
we can.
I'm here.
Fantastic. All right, so let me kick it off. So when most people think about AI, I would claim that they think that AI is something relatively new. Because after all, generative AI only really became a household term 3 years ago when we saw the launch of ChatGPT in November 2022. But in fact, AI is nothing new. We've had machine learning, neural networks, robotics, and computer vision, for instance, for a long time. So let me for a moment take you back a few years, back to 2017, so 8 years. Back then, the consultancy McKinsey published a report stating that the world would see a loss of between 400 to 800 million jobs because of AI. But it wouldn't happen right away, more like the shape of a hockey stick, hence the slide with this hockey stick. So for a long time, we would see little job loss, and then suddenly an exponential development, moving from a horizontal to a more vertical situation. And this is where we are today, where the hockey stick shape moves from horizontal to vertical. And now the loss of job will happen fast. And the world will look fundamentally different, I would claim, in just 5 years from now. And AI will be fully integrated in our lives. And why do I share this with you? Because unless we understand how to apply critical thinking, there's a risk not only that we will lose our job, but also that AI will control us instead of us controlling AI. So on that note, welcome to Critical Thinking and welcome to NorthStar Critical Skills Academy. 15th of October and the first of a series of critical skills presentations, which we will kick off in January next year. But more about that a little bit later. Let's focus on critical thinking right now. So today's objective is really simple. We want to share with you and discuss with you what is critical thinking, why is it important, and certainly in an AI context, and last but not least, how do we become better at critical thinking? The agenda is also pretty simple. We start now with the presentation, the what, the why, and the how. And then after approximately 45 minutes, let's see, we open up the floor for discussion. And on that note, if you have any questions, any remarks, any insights, any perspectives you want to share already now, please do so in the chat forum. And we'll get back to them later when we have the discussion. And we are really eager to, also hear your perspectives, both on what we are sharing today, but also what you think about critical thinking in general, and also your learnings and perspectives on that. So who are we? Let's start with you, Andy. So let's go beauty before age. Andy, take it away.
I'm glad that's the main part I could contribute to this presentation. So thank you everybody for joining. This is really a great sign of that that you're all interested in talking about a topic that we think is really important. And it's really about how we work with the AI. So if you look at my background, I've been always in supply chain management. If you're familiar with supply chain management, you will say, well, that's where you move not just the goods from one place to the next. You have to work with a lot of times with people, with the organizations, with the contradictions that are in there, and of course with processes which generate the data, which is then used by technology. So I've done that not just in Singapore, but actually I met Asger quite a while back, and where we kind of initially discussed, hey, we should do something together to really help interested participants to really prepare for what's coming at them, because we've been seeing that there is a lot of changes coming up. I grew up in Germany, and now I'm working in the States, and I'm glad that we have some participants here from North America as well. And basically, the key thing that I've been doing during this time was to really work not just on getting the day-to-day operations done, but also look at innovation and what that means in terms of how the work of the future will look like, and of course also the delays that you will find, which is exactly that hockey stick that Asger mentioned. With that, Asger, would you like to share some of your background as well?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Andy. And I'll do it brief as well. So I'm obviously Asger. I'm a Dane. I'm a business professional. I live and I work in Singapore. Been here for the past 10 plus years. 20 years of experience working in corporate, and now a bit more than 15 years working, or rather running my own business, MID, which is a management consultancy. And one of the reasons why we do this presentation on critical thinking has to do with my background, because I used to work many years ago as the innovation director in a think tank. So I used to spend quite a lot of time on thinking about what will be the future jobs and skills, which again led me to research different critical skills, among others critical thinking. And this is what I think, or I hope anyway, that Andy and I have now taken to the next level. So talking about critical thinking in an AI-driven future, and that's really our focus. It's not just critical per se, but critical thinking in a context. And on that note, let's start talking a little bit about what is critical thinking, and that is back to you, Andy. And I know you want to start with this example here.
Yeah, so thank you. I wanted to start with an example that's actually not made up. This is an actual example where I was working with a client who wanted to implement an AI-driven supply chain planning system, and that planning system, they switched it on and promised to save about a quarter of their inventory right off the bat. Now, if you imagine yourself in the shoes of, say, a project sponsor on the client side, you put your reputation on the line saying we need a new system, we need to go through all the trouble of making changes, of taking the organization along. Numbers, you say, wow, this is fantastic. It looked at historical sales, it looked at my supplier lead times, it looked at the cost information. If I can save 25%, my job is done. I'll have employment for life. I can do whatever I want. Now the key question here is this actually the right recommendation? Now, fortunately, at that time, we actually stepped back and said, well, that's interesting, because that is a lot. If it sounds too good to be true, it's usually too good to be true. So the key question was, well, what are the factors that went into this particular recommendation? We know it analyzed the existing data, but what did that mean? Is this recommendation actually stable? Does it mean that if we look at this particular set of data, that is 25%, but if the moment lead times change by a day or two, it suddenly changes to a completely different result? Very important also, the objective function. Did the AI optimize to save costs or to serve the customers? And then, of course, the key question, well, did the system understand the training data correctly, which is a topic that will come back several times along the way. And in this case, of course, you would say, well, sales data is something that someone buys, but what happens if there's no inventory? Do we still recognize the demand, or do we just lose that sale? And finally, something that is more relevant since April 2nd, the Liberation Day, qualitative data. What happens to changes in the geopolitical environment, which are not captured in the data itself? So this is where, on the next slide, I want to give you a bit of a framework of how to look at this. So from a critical thinking perspective, what is it actually? And the key thing is that we really take a step back and say, and think deliberately and systematically, what is the result that I'm looking at? Or what is the question that I'm looking at? What is the question behind the result that I'm seeing? Really moving away from a quick decision towards think about what went into this decision, how did I make the decision, what is the outcome? Then, very importantly, connecting facts logically. What am I seeing and how does it connect? Next, again, very important, you will be familiar, you will have heard that several times, testing assumptions on the previous slide. Testing the assumptions, not just the assumptions that we know about, but also the assumptions that we may not be aware of. Have we actually captured everything that goes into the thought process that we have? And very importantly, separating the emotion from the evidence. The key thing here is not that we say we need to operate like robots. This is one of the key messages we want to have for you in this webinar. We're not becoming more like an AI, capturing more data, thinking more rationally, but that we use the human brain, our skills, our thought processes, our logic, and also the emotions to think about what is it that we need to do in order to complement the AI. And this is where we come to this slide, really the key difference. Traditional thinking, critical thinking. Traditionally, we're all wired to make quick decisions. We see a pen drop off the table, we quickly grab it. And you might have noticed that when it just happened to me. From a critical perspective, however, we really deliberately employ all the intellectual tools we have in our brain, the background of this slide, to think about what is going on and make sure that we come to well-reasoned conclusions. Now, on the next slide, let's see. Asger will take you through a quick exercise to check kind of where you are at this point, and you may or may not have to answer. But I leave it up to Asger. How come?
Well, you don't have to answer. You're welcome to, but you definitely don't have to. But yeah, I want to do a small exercise with you, just to kind of practice what we're talking about, and I've called this a brain teaser, and it's an exercise about a bat and a ball, and it's a very simple question actually. So imagine that you have a bat and a ball, and the total price of the two items is $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Now again, you don't have to answer. You're welcome to put your answer in the chat forum, but I'll give you the answer anyway. Just think about it for 5-10 seconds. So how much does the ball cost? I'm almost certain that some of you, just like myself when I saw it the first time, answered 10 cents. But it's not 10 cents. The ball cost 5 cents. Let's do the math together here for a second. So you know the total price is $1.10. And you know, certainly if you read or listen carefully to the statement, that the bat cost not $1, but $1 more. Meaning that the bat must cost $1.05, and then obviously leaving 5 cents to the ball, and resulting in a $1 difference. That's the answer. 5 cents, not 10 cents. So why does this matter? because it illustrates that fast, intuitive thinking feels right, but that it's often wrong. Critical thinking, as what Andy talked about, is about checking before acting. And think for a second of the consequences of applying fast thinking when dealing with a much more complex problem with potential catastrophic consequences if answering incorrectly. So why do we get it wrong? Even in a discussion, now I don't know if you got it wrong, but let me assume that, because I've done this exercise before and people have, a lot of people actually get it wrong. Even in a discussion about critical thinking. I want to talk a little bit about the Nobel Prize winner, Daniel Kahneman, in just a minute in more details. But, I want to bring him up right now because one of the things he said, I think, is really relevant in this discussion. He said, and I'm quoting him now, "Our minds are wired for speed, not accuracy. So we don't pause to think. We want to answer quickly. And that makes us vulnerable because we get it wrong, even in a simple exercise like this one with the bat and the ball." I also want to bring up the old Greek philosopher Socrates in a slide a little bit later, but I also want to quote him here for this, and I'm quoting now. He said, "Ask sharp, uncomfortable questions and expose contradictions and weaknesses in what you think. Step back, take that deep breath, which will allow you to arrive at answering 5 cents, not 10 cents. And I think that's why critical thinking is on the list of the most important skills for the future. You have here a list of 10 different skills as identified by the global think tank World Economic Forum, which every few years does a survey among thousands of companies worldwide to identify the skills that will matter most in the future of work. And you have skills like problem solving, resilience, leadership, creativity, etc., etc. You can read them here. And we wanted to start with critical thinking because we believe that this is indeed the most important skill in an AI-driven future, which we will try and substantiate in the rest of this presentation. So why does critical thinking matter more now than ever? Well, there's a few reasons, and we've cherry-picked 4 of them here. The world is becoming increasingly volatile, uncertain, and complex. You might have heard the term VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And, if you think about what's happening right now, you got Trump tariffs, you've got the Ukraine war, you've got the conflict in the Middle East, you've got a more self-assertive China, and you've got AI changing the game totally. So there's a lot of complexity and uncertainty out there. And then on top of that, we now have the risk of misinformation because of AI. AI and deepfake blurring the line between what is real and what is fake. And one of the big challenges with generative AI, for instance, is the risk of what we call hallucination. That ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, Claude, or whatever the AI tool is called, make up facts and present those facts as truth. And I'll give you an example in just a minute. So, we believe that critical thinking now is more important than ever. And I want to expand that a little bit with what I call the modern challenge, AI and bias. Because if you, on the one hand, has AI and artificial intelligence, hallucinating, giving fabricated information sometimes, and if you then pair that with human biases, For instance, confirmation bias, anchoring bias, or survivorship bias. Lots of biases where we think as humans that we think and act rationally, but indeed we don't. Confirmation bias, for instance, leading us to accept AI outputs that align with our existing beliefs. Anchoring bias, which makes us over-rely on the first response we receive, etc., etc. So if you combine the two, you actually end up with a pretty dangerous combination that, as we talked about before, can result in catastrophic consequences. And this is why critical thinking is really an important skill moving forward. And the solution, ladies and gentlemen, is not, in our view anyway, to avoid AI tools. They're too powerful and they're too useful. Instead, as I write here on this slide at the bottom of it, we must develop systematic approaches to verify AI outputs and recognize our own cognitive blind spots. I hope we kind of start, making it clear why we think that critical thinking is becoming increasingly important. So we have three cases we want to share with you. I have the first one, and Andy has the next two ones. Okay, let me start with this one. A little bit of background. So I asked, when we did this slide deck here, I think it was Gemini, or it was ChatGPT. Don't remember, doesn't matter. Any one of them. Give me a good example of, AI getting it wrong. So it came up here, right? A Danish SME, so a small, medium-sized enterprise or company, used an AI tool to scan customer reviews. The initial summary suggested customers are highly satisfied. But then a closer inspection revealed a crucial flaw, that AI had focused predominantly on 5-star reviews and underweighted negative reviews written in Danish rather than in English. Two lessons from this. First one, the AI reflects the data it sees, not necessarily the whole picture. And here you have a clear example of that. Second lesson, think twice. It's basically a question of thinking twice before you act. Critical thinking in its essence is not rocket science. It is about stepping back, taking a deep breath, and thinking a little bit harder than you do when you do fast thinking. Now there's actually, and this I think is pretty interesting, because when I saw this and I heard what I'm sharing now, I was about to abandon this slide, and then Andy told me, no, that's why you should keep it in here. Because what I found out was that I was interested in knowing which company is this Danish SME. So I asked Gemini, and it came back and said, no, it's just a made-up story. It's just it's just an illustration. But guy, I was, shaking my computer and saying, I asked for a real story, and you come back with a fabricated one. Fake is all over. Even when you ask for the truth, you get a hallucination. And I was a little bit disillusioned when I saw that answer. But luckily, because I think there's a learning in this and a story in this as well. And I'm glad that you, Andy, persuaded me to keep it in the slide deck. And on that note, Andy, I know you have the next two stories. The first one on IBM Watson.
Yeah, in this case not as funny as the previous one, but exactly going into the same direction. Now in this case, we always talk about that the decisions that AI should be making become more and more important. And in the study that IBM was doing with Watson a couple of years back, both in the Sloan Kettering Cancer Center as well as in the oncology department of the University Hospital of Marburg in Germany, they run several approaches, and the result was that the AI came out with recommendations that were supposed to be based on more factors than the human doctors can consider. And in order to very quickly help the patients, Now, the result was that usually, or rather very often, Watson was recommending treatments that were basically unsafe for the patients. So patient is already has a serious disease. On top of it, a very hard treatment, which would, if not necessarily help the patient, maybe even have fatal consequences. Now, to take it away with first the problem, it was that the initial training data was not available in a volume that was needed to train the AI. So what the model developers were doing, they were making up data in order to get to making up cases in order to get to enough data that they could train the AI. Now, and this is where I want to take you away from the problem towards the key message, or one of the key messages for the talk today, is not that AI is naturally bad, but we have to be questioning what is the recommendation that comes out, whether it's a Danish company, whether it's a treatment. The expertise of the doctors, they were able to take a step back and say, these recommendations do not make sense. The objective function of a doctor is do not make harm. And that was the first step they did. They said, if the treatment is too aggressive, we won't implement it, because that's what we're trained for. On the other hand, if you think about it today, a couple of years later, if you get an MRI scan or if you get an X-ray, most likely the doctor will not look at it. It will be the AI that looks at it and says, oh, you have a broken bone, or you need a stent, or you have this or this or this or this. So AI has made a lot of progress, but in certain areas, not in everything. Now, on the next example, less dramatic, but equally consequential for each individual, Amazon was trying for a while to optimize their hiring process by employing an AI agent. And what they found when they analyzed the results later on, kind of the recommendations of who is the best candidate coming out of, according to the machine, the result was that a lot of the implicit biases, the implicit assumptions were not considered. Generally, if you look at a programming team, you find that there's a certain gender bias, so the gender bias was supported. If there was an ethnical bias, again, ethnically, the AI would pre-select people who would fit into this team. If you think about today, a lot of companies employing the AI bots again, trying to fast track the hiring process. And if you look on social media, you will get all the recommendations of how to modify a CV in order to get a better result within the training data. One very interesting thing I read earlier this week was that basically candidates embed instructions to the machine, to the AI bot, within the text itself. Sometimes it's whited out on a white piece of paper, so human eyes would not see it. On the other hand, it's something where basically, again, the depending on how we look at how to use the AI, we may end up with results that we don't want to see. That's why very powerful tools, but they need a powerful mind to control them. And Asger, I think you want to take us back to a couple of tools and practices how to leverage these tools better.
Yes, indeed, and thank you, Andy. So what we want to spend a little bit of time on now is talking about the how. How can we become better at critical thinking? And of course, you know, it's a Maggie edition, Cube edition, because we can't cover that much in the time we have available. But let me try and just spend a little bit of time on sharing some tools and tricks on how we can become better at critical thinking. I've got 3 slides on that. So here is 5 practical tools which we think can be helpful. We call it the red teaming, the 5 whys, the bias checklist, ask open questions, and AI double check. So let me take you through them one by one. So the first one, red teaming, meaning being the devil's advocate. And I'll use an example to illustrate it. So the example here is that your marketing team proposes to launch a new product next month. And you assign one colleague then to play the devil's advocate and argue why this could fail. For example, we're launching too close to our biggest competitors campaign. So by doing that, you actually, expose the weaknesses in your plan, which again then can help you strengthen the final strategy. So, be the devil's advocate on your own suggestions and own ideas, your own conviction. The next one, 5 whys, is actually a tool invented by Toyota many years ago. It's basically about keep asking why. Again, let me use an example to illustrate it. So the problem here is made up problem. Customer complain about slow delivery. So why? Because packages arrive late. The first why. So why do they arrive late? Because dispatching takes too long. Why does it take too long? Because orders are processed manually. Why are they processed manually? Because our order system isn't automated. Why isn't it automated? Because no one budgeted for system upgrades. So you see here, by asking or keep asking why, you get to the root cause of the problem. And in this case, it's about lack of investment in automation, not lazy employees, which you might have been inclined to think if you didn't dive deeper into the whys. I think it's a very helpful tool. The bias checklist, again, an example here. It's about checking for common biases. So before deciding which supplier to choose, your team checks for common biases. I'll just mention 3 of them here. Are we anchored to the first quote we received? Are we overconfident in a familiar brand? Or do we have a tendency to seek and remember information that we already believe in, what is called confirmation bias? And this checklist ensures, or helps us ensure, that reasoning is evidence-based, not emotion-based. Ask open questions. So instead of saying, don't you think the new design is too risky? Ask, what are the possible risks and how might we reduce them? And this invites to exploration, not defensiveness, and it encourages for better reasoning. The final one here, AI double check. Ask more than one AI tool. So you ask ChatGPT or another one, Gemini, to summarize a report. But before you use it, you verify key facts against the original source, or you cross-check with 1 or 2 other AI tools. Perplexity, Copilot, there's lots of them, right? So you actually ensure accuracy by treating AI, and this is important, treat it as an assistant, not an authority. That makes the difference. I promised you I would get back to Daniel Kahneman for 2 reasons, actually. Because if you want to take your critical skills to the next level, I would encourage you to read this book if you don't already know it, by Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner 2002, who wrote a book some decade or 2 ago called Thinking Fast and Slow. And you should read it anyway. It's a great read. It's not an easy read, but it's a very insightful read. And the funny thing is, he actually doesn't talk about critical thinking, but it is what he's actually presenting. So he talks about 2 different systems of thinking: fast thinking and slow thinking. System 1, system 2. The first system is fast. it's automatic, it's intuitive, it's effortless. It helps us to read faces, drive a car, finish a familiar sentence without too much conscious thought. It's efficient, but it's also where biases live. And system one is the reason why so many people get the bat and the ball puzzle from before wrong. We jump to what feels right, not what is right. And that's a crucial difference between the two. System two, on the other hand, is slow. It's deliberate, it's logical, and it's effortful. It's what we use when we double check a contract, or we analyze an investment, or we question whether an AI generated report makes sense. It's harder work, but it's the system that protects us from mistakes. And here's the challenge. Our brains are wired to prefer system one because it saves energy. That's why we so often rush to judgment, even when the stakes are high. So critical thinking is really about, essentially choosing system two on purpose. It's like saying, wait, let me slow down. Let me check the evidence. Let me connect the dots logically before I decide. And in today's world, with AI outputs and misinformation and complexity, like we talked about before, this isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's survival. So because people who rely only on system one will be blindsided. People who, on the other hand, can activate system two when it matters will be able to navigate uncertainty with confidence. Right. Last slide on the how. Back to Socrates. I'm not going to go deep in this slide. As I said before, we'll share the slide deck with you afterwards so you can read it in more details. I just want to, highlight the 7 rules that Socrates is talking about. He's talking about define the terms, question the assumptions for what you hear, demand evidence, test the consequences, spot any contradictions, doubt the obvious, and consider alternatives. And if you use his 7 critical thinking rules, I think you are in pretty good shape in terms of deciding whether you are evidence-based or emotion-based in your critical thinking, or sometimes lack of same. Right. We're getting to the end, so let's hurry up a little bit here.
Yeah, let me quickly take you through to one of my one slide. If you remember nothing else of this presentation, the one piece I definitely want you to remember is, keep in mind, AI is basically a probability machine. People like to say it's a reasoning machine, but actually it's a probability. It's a probability machine. What comes next? And the key difference we have to make when working with probabilities is whether we look at correlation or we look at causation. And I give you here kind of 2 opposing examples. One success story: a visionary leader has lifted the startup to phenomenal heights. It's a darling of the stock market. Everybody became fantastically rich. So the mistaken causation would be, well, founder is brilliant. That means there's always success. On the other hand, you can also turn it around and say, well, a failure story: the reckless founder was incompetent and ran the company into the ground. Now you'll say, well, we know our managers, we know the chief executives, the leaders of industry. Now I give you an example. Think about Jack Welch, Neutron Jack of General Electric. Most of us will be old enough already to still remember him. If you think about him, he was the darling of modern management for the longest time, until his disciple Jeff Immelt took over, and it turns out that GE is now a shadow of itself. Now, was Jack Welch a brilliant manager, or was he a brilliant stock market darling? Now, if you look at it kind of we can say, well, look, the number twos of Jack Welch, they went on to run GE, Boeing, which today is also a shadow of its former self. On the other hand, others went to 3M, a brilliant company still today, ABB, Home Depot. So did we define the term, what is a successful manager, correctly? Did we apply those skills that Asker just talked about? Or do we run into the same trap again? Now, if you did or did not, let's wrap up, and then give you a bit of an outlook, and then go into the discussions. Asker,
yeah, let's wrap it up. We got 3 minutes left here in the presentation, and we got 3 slides, so that's basically 1 minute per slide. So wrap up. The future belongs to those who can think clearly in an unclear world. You know, that's the headline for this slide here. And 3, you know, things I want to, you know, to take away from this. You know, critical thinking is not optional. It is a question about the ability to think critical, and it has become a survival skill, like we talked about before. You can't live without it. It's becoming increasingly important, and it's also the best defense against complexity. You know, it helps you make sound decision under pressure. And last but not least on this slide, and I want to read this out loud because I think it's important. Critical thinking bridges the gap between data and decisions. It turns overwhelming information streams into clear insights, and insights into confident action. And this transformation is what separates effective people from those who are paralyzed by complexity. On that note, our final slide here before we open up the floor. This is the first presentation that Andy and I are doing together. And as I said in the beginning, in the introduction, we plan to do a whole series of similar presentations from January onwards, probably 1 or 2 presentations per month. Next one being on complex problem solving, and then, you know, the rest of the list here, same format, 45 minutes plus 15 minutes discussion. And the reason why we're opening up this presentation already now here in October is that we would love both to practice, but also to hear your feedback on both what you've heard today and what you think about taking this forward. Is this interesting? Is this something you would sign up for another time? Mind you, that we plan to charge you next time. We charge you today by asking for your feedback, but next time we will we will charge you, you know, in dollars and cents, and it's not just $1.10. I promise you that. But more about that later. We'll keep you informed. Okay, Andy, will you take charge of the discussion here, and I will stop sharing, and then we can hear what people think.
Yeah, I was. This is exactly where we wanted to get to. Really, kind of a bit of a conversation around AI and how it affects you, how you're preparing for it. Whether you have heard anything interesting today, or whether you say, well, this is all stuff we heard before. You've seen some of the examples are not that new, but they keep coming up over and over again. And kind of talk a bit about where we are. One of the kind of I haven't seen any questions in the chat so far, apart from whether or not value-added tax was included or not. It was a case in Oregon, so there's no sales tax. Lucky you. Kind of as a conversation starter, let's look at, for example, the somewhat with AI generated report coming out of Deloitte for the Australian government. And the result was, on the one hand, according to what I could find out, they're only going to reimburse the final installment, because according to Deloitte, they said, look, you asked us to support a certain finding. We did, and when we couldn't find anything, we made up stuff. A bit more polarized, stated a bit more polarizing than the actual statement, but it shows you how AI can be misused.
So, what do you think? Was this interesting?
I think it was interesting. Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm coming from, a field from, you see up there from Symphony, who's selling AI products for retail companies. And one of the things that we often meet with when we are out there is basically that a lot of people say, okay, what would that mean to my job, right? What does it mean? I think what I'm going to tell you now, you're probably taking many steps further than what we normally say. But what we normally say is that, but yes, it's true that you will be given the answers, but you need to ask the right questions, right? It's just a different way of looking at it, right? It's like you cannot, if you don't understand what you're working with, you cannot ask the right questions. So you are still needed. That's basically where we're coming from. And what we normally say is, and I think, or should I say it right? I mean, I think this presentation you gave here is, yes, you can argue, yes, if you stop and think about it, yes, it makes perfect sense. But a lot of time, at least in my line of work and the people I work with, people don't stop up and think, right? They do, as I think what you was talking about, Andy, right? They need quick decisions. They need quick thought. If you start thinking, the subject has moved when you're trying to answer, right? Because then you're on to something else. So it makes a lot of sense for sure.
Thank you, Klaus. Appreciate it.
Asger,
Any other?
Should I just come with a comment or two before I have to leave it in a few minutes? Asger,
Go ahead,
thank you,
Hans.
and Andy, thank you very much for inviting. First of all, I think it's great to hear some critical approaches to AI. I've been in my network group, Asger, VL Gruppe, and there are tons of seminars on AI, and I can hear how. I mean, it's also rather fantastic with the results that my colleagues can come up with, but I don't know whether I'm just old and grumpy. I'm a little bit critical about it, but so it's great that some can introduce some realism, some realistic views to what it is that we are saying on this. Slow and fast thinking. I mean, I think I can remember from my university days. I mean, there's also routine and non-routine thinking, and I think routine thinking is that you cannot. There's many decisions every day that you don't stop or think about. You've done it so many times, and then it's more routine. And I think there are many concepts out there that could also apply to this. I think it was Anthony Giddens I was studying at the time. So there could be many. And basically, isn't it also? I mean, a decision-making process. So there's tons of literature on decision making, and I think I can hear that this could also be very relevant. And the last pitch is saying that, I mean, this is probability machine. I like that one. It's good to remember this that each time you are giving a result. But refreshing to me. Thank you very much, and good luck with it. I think there's a need for such an offer, and I think many who are overly enthusiastic need to stop up and listen to you two guys. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans. Appreciate your comments, and thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Sarah, I think you were first.
Yep.
Yes, so yeah, thank you for a super interesting presentation. One thing that I can't help thinking is you can also ask an AI to apply critical thinking. So how do you incorporate that? The more I find, the more I work with AIs on a daily basis, the more, first of all, the better it knows me, but also I can actually ask, it to bounce ideas off me or help me find the blind spots and stuff like that. So there is also that aspect of working with AIs that would be interesting also to see reflected in your slides. And then I also had a question in terms of, first of all, the speed, and perhaps that's tied a little bit to it, the speed that this critical skills thinking will change as the AIs get smarter and as they are exposed to critical thinking. And I'm also thinking in terms of generations. There will be, for instance, I have a son that is 25. He's a software engineer. He has worked with AIs pretty much his entire education, and his approach to how he uses AI is very different from mine. And I'm thinking that sort of the generational differences will also be interesting to hear reflected in a seminar.
Point. Yeah. Andy, you want to reflect on that?
Yeah. So let me take the first part about the asking AI to apply critical thinking. And I want to separate that a bit from the other example you said, basically using AI as a sounding board, right? I'll give you an example of what we probably find very much on LinkedIn these days. If you look at a lot of the posts, they seem relatively bland, which usually is the result of asking the AI to just give an answer. While what you're describing is the opposite. You come in with an idea and say, hey, I have a particular problem to solve and I want to look at it from different angles. And what you need is you use the AI as an assistant to add additional aspects to what you want to look at. So you basically, you keep your critical thinking with yourself, but you ask for additional input, which is a very different approach from just handing it all over to the AI. Which is something that may or may not work as well as you think. But you're going in the right direction. You leverage the AI in order to get better at your critical thinking, but you're not handing it over. Asger, what do you have any additional thoughts?
No, I think it was brilliant. Thanks, Andy. I think, in the interest of time, let's move on, because we have 3 more people wanting to share. I think you were first, Göran. Take it away.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, thank you for this. I think it's an angel to the problem, which is very much needed to be considered. And it's interesting to hear about the critical thinking. And it certainly has an importance in decision making, but I can't really figure out how it can work out in the real world when we're out there, because today everything is about speed. Speed stresses all organizations today. We have and speed and the implementation is critical for success. For all companies. You talked about World Economic Forum. It's already 10 years ago since World Economic Forum talked about that the speed of development and the implementation of that is the critical factor, absolutely most important factor for success, both in public sector and private sector. I can give an example of speed of development. When I started my company in interim management more than 20 years ago, but if we go back to year 2000, the speed of development by IMD was considered to be 20 years. That was the time period it would take to know double amount what we knew at that point in time. Today, I haven't seen an update because I suspect they've given up on calculating it, but the speed of development I expect to be somewhere between 1 and 2 years. And that is what causes the complexity. Things are happening so fast, things are being developed. We have more and more PhDs developing more and more things. and being implementing faster and faster. And that is the critical factor for companies to find out how they should handle it. And how can you include this one method of decision making in the speed?
Yeah.
That is the thing I would need to think about.
Yeah, I'd love to think about it as well. And, you know, I'm not sure I have the answer right now, but definitely something worth pursuing and keeping in mind. So thank you, Jørgen. Appreciate that. I don't know if you have any comments on that, Andreas, before we move on, because we are, you know, quickly running out of time. We got 2 more people wanting to share. So anything from your side, Andreas, before I leave the word to.
Let me answer it similar to the way you phrased it, Jørgen. I would prefer not to give a quick answer, but rather to give you a good answer at a later stage.
Oh, that's a good one. Let's connect the 2 of you afterwards. Jesper.
Yeah, thanks. Very good this, and I think it's very needed in the time at the moment. One of the things that I can't help thinking about is, where does AI get all the information? Comes from the internet, comes from people who already wrote something. It's not like AI is coming up with something new that we haven't seen at all, right?
No.
It's summing up a lot of information, making assumption, as Andreas said, but it's based on everything we have on the internet right now, okay? Now, I'm thinking a lot of things when I think about that, like, who made AI? Do they have any kind of bias programmed in to AI, okay?
Yeah.
And what kind of information do we get out of it? I mean, if I'm asking AI to generate some programming code for me, fine, no problem, it's working or it's not. But when I'm asking AI to analyze the spot I have here, combined with the cough I have, this is where the problem starts, the way I see it, no? Because it's simply not good enough to give me a correct answer. We need a doctor for that, right? And this is where I see a lot of things happening in the future, where I think critical thinking is really necessary. I mean, we could go on and take a lot of other daily questions where people would just say, yeah, sure, AI is telling me this. Yeah, but think about it. Is it really right? I mean, does it make sense? So, yeah, I see a lot of this coming up. And I don't know how. I have a problem sometimes really trusting AI with information that is, say, deeper than just normal stuff.
Keep asking why.
Yeah.
Define the terms.
Before
and check the objective function of the AI. That's a big topic.
Yeah.
Before we take the last question or comment from Lars, just briefly, we're running out of time. So if you need to leave, you know, we understand why. We understand, and just want to, you know, leave you with one thing, because we'd love to send you a brief Google form afterwards, asking you, you know, to rate today's session, so we have a little bit better understanding of your feedback, which will be, you know, very valuable for Andy and me moving forward in our planning for the January launch of the Academy. All right, thank you. Lars, you have a comment or a question? Take it away.
Yes. Yeah, it's a comment to the whole concept of critical thinking. It was created as an educational ideal. The first people really talking about critical thinking is back to 30s and 40s US, as an idea on how to create generations of Americans who were able to keep the democracy in the United States strong. It's people like Dewey who was behind these kind of thinking. And they truly believe that it took a whole educational life to become good at critical thinking. So it was from first grade until 12th grade, onwards to high school and university, that you constantly work with your ability to do critical thinking. And you did it together with your peers. You learned that you could think better when you were more than one. So my reflection on what I've heard today is that I think you're on to maybe the most critical question of any questions about AI, but is it the right forum in terms of us being 12 individuals and this actually being a deep structural problem? Something that's all about how we decide to vote on our politicians. When we look at education and investments in education, at least in most Western world countries, it is very, very far down on the list of importance. It is only when you do the symbolic politics, where you discuss, if you should kick out evolution theory in American schools, that it actually gets the media's support. But if we don't start now to generate generations of people much smarter at thinking critical than we ever became, then these tools will never be under control. So saying, yes, this is the subject. This is the most critical thing we can discuss, but who should we discuss it with? And how can we make these things actually happen? Just to close on this one, I normally say to my kids, never prompt alone. Always sit down with somebody you trust when you prompt. It could be that red teaming that could say, Lars, that's stupid. And experiencing that, sitting with my peer, discussing what AI is telling us, is forming critical thinking. So never prompt alone, never drink alone, never prompt alone. And then I've heard a guy in a Danish company saying, I want to hire philosophers. They're the only people in the world who understand how to ask questions. So if you take a bachelor on the University in Copenhagen in philosophy, you learn how to ask questions. And that's exactly what you showed us today, Asger. And I think that is key, is if we get a generation of people who can be in a Socratic dialogue, then AI will never have a chance to fool us. But if we don't, then as Jesper said, they got it. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you very much, Lars. And I just want to share one thing with you that Andy and I have been discussing, because we phrased it before as this is the most important skill of the 10 skills we want to do an academy on. But we've actually been also discussing just briefly, and maybe we should talk more about it, whether we should do an academy on critical skills or critical thinking itself. To unfold it more and go deeper and have more examples, discussions, workshops, whatever, to kind of go down your path. We haven't thought it through, but it sounds like we're not alone in thinking along those lines.
I think instead of meeting your therapist one-on-one, we should meet in these kind of forum and helping each other to become stronger in critical thinking. It's whenever we do this as something we believe we can fix ourselves, I think we have a problem, because it's so much easier to be critical together with other people. Yeah.
Thank you, Lars. We got more comments and more questions. Fantastic. We're happy that you're still with us. So we'll continue a little bit longer, and certainly with you, Thomas, you have a comment or a question.
Yeah, I mean, it's in terms of topics going forward. It's a topic I would like to attend for sure. And that's about, we humans right now, with all discussions going on about artificial intelligence, are searching for our purpose, kind of. But I think it could be interesting to discuss what our contribution to society could be if, say, artificial intelligence reaches a point where it can perform, all the tasks of a professional nature we know of today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If so, what would our contribution be then to society? What part would we play? Rather than, searching for, almost desperately for humans to keep on contributing to, the professional tasks we know of today. Make sense?
Yeah.
It's the key question that kind of where we started with, and with AI gaining more skills, don't compete with the AI, because the machine will be faster. What are the skills that are left?
Yeah, I
And
know,
then, of
but
course,
what
the
if
contribution.
but what if we reach a point where, all the skills critical thinking and the skills you have lined up for future discussions, what if AI reaches a point where it can, apply all of those skills as well? That's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
What would our, role in society be?
Yeah. It's a good question.
This goes back
Maybe
to
we'll consult our Bible here, critical thinking for dummies. Patrick, you have a question or a comment?
Oh yes. Thanks, Esker and Andres, for sharing this topic. I think this topic is extremely important, and I think you're spot on, especially when you couple it with AI. I think just to give you a bit of context, um, okay, but maybe before that, I think my suggestion is that if you can develop a framework in a sense of a series of questions that everybody should remember, say, for example, the 7 critical thinking rules of Socrates, list it out as a questions or becomes a worksheet. I think that this, if everybody can memorize these 7 items, and then every time they are prompted with something that looks suspicious, go through the 7 questions to see whether or not they will believe in the AI recommendation, I think that worksheet would be fantastic. It becomes a framework and a strategy to help people. I think that I highly recommend or suggest that you include that in your teaching. I think that would be really beneficial. So to give you a bit of context why I say this is that I'm involved in a lot of innovation work, innovation and creativity. At the same time, I teach entrepreneurship at all the local university. And one of the early research that we are currently embarking on with early results is that we've been toying with using AI to teach entrepreneurship, or rather to use AI to help this early startup ruggedize or to even appraise the novelty of their ideas. And then, of course, I think as an educator, the first reaction would be that, wow, if you introduce AI, are we outsourcing creativity? So there's a constant debate out of that. Then our response to that is that we have to couple critical thinking, introduce that first, embed it into the mindset of the learners, then we introduce Gen AI. Now, the idea why our hypothesis with Gen AI is that Gen AI is such a fantastic knowledge aggregator that it actually helps our undergraduate learners get a real sense of what the world is thinking about a certain perspective. For example, sustainability. So a lot of students would think that sustainability is about recycling, upcycling, and all. But when you pass the same problem statement into Gen AI, it actually gives you the world perspective about what works, what does not work, what are the complications, what are the reality, what are the costs. And with the introduction of Gen AI, we realize that the students are able to so-called become critically mature within an extremely short amount of time with the help of AI. But of course, how do we then overcome hallucination or to prevent them getting stuck or contented with what AI have given them? This is why we built in the critical thinking before we introduce Gen AI. Yeah, so this is our early research, and we are still collecting more data. The more classes we run, we collect more data to see how effective is this Gen AI is able to help even in creativity, entrepreneurship classes. Yeah, just sharing on that note.
Fantastic, Patrick, and thanks for sharing. And we'd love to hear more about that. So let's keep in contact, all three of us, on that particular subject there. Thank you. I can see a lot of you are still with us. Fantastic, and I think your hand is up again, Lars. Is that?
No, it was an old hand. It was an old hand.
It's an old hand.
That's an old hand.
And Thomas, is your hand also old, or? We can't hear that, Thomas.
Right.
It's down
I just
now,
removed
so
it.
we
Sorry.
can.
Yeah.
No worries. Okay, I think that means that we've come to an end. So thank you also all of you for participating today and joining the discussion. We really appreciate that. And whether Andy and I did a good job, we'll hear more from you later on that. But definitely, it's a subject of interest, and that in itself is a great feedback, because then I think Andy and I are more inclined to kind of pursue this and fold it out more in 2026, together with the other critical skills that we want to pursue. So thank you to all of you for joining in today. Much appreciated. Great to see you all, and stay in touch.
And I hope
Thank you.
I hope you could take something along. We definitely took a lot of the feedback along, and very insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for putting this together.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.